Hey guys, welcome back to this is 3, I think.
3. Finishing book 1.
We're finishing book 1.
Man, was it a roller coaster for Kenzie.
Stop! Welcome to Zodiac Sunday in our year of the Zodiac.
Mm-hmm.
We have completed book 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it has been an absolute freaking roller coaster. But hey guys, I'm Kenz.
And I'm Allison.
And welcome to our Spicy Book Nook. What a roller coaster of emotions.
She messaged me when she finished it, and she was like, oh my God, I'm shook. And I almost cried. So that's what we're about to get into.
Okay. So last episode, we left off. We had completed chapter 10, and now we're at chapter 11.
Yep.
I
have so many
we're
highlights.
We're just going to kind of get into it. So chapter 11 is when
they find out that. So
it's when it's her first session with Orion, isn't it?
The one that I have highlighted is her talking to Diego. She finds out, it's from Darcy's perspective. She gets a notification on her atlas about a body that had been found by a student from Zodiac Academy. That was a nymph attack.
Hang on, pause. Before that, her horoscope for the day. The very last sentence said, "Be wary of those close to you. Even the friendliest of dogs can bite."
Dun dun dun.
I highlighted this, okay, when I read it. We're just going to preface with that. I highlighted this when I read it.
And you just didn't even...
I don't even think I had a note to it. It was just, I was like...
Interesting phrase of words.
Okay,
so then she finds out that there's been this attack.
Nymph is currently still at large.
Yep. And then, so she starts... This is where we kind of find out what...
a nymph is.
More about nymphs. Because she's asking Diego. Because he seems to know... Because they're new to the world, so they have no idea.
Yep.
So they say, nymphs are another race. They live in the shadows of Fae. They're our enemies. Why? I whispered. Because he glances over his shoulder, then links his arm through mine and draws me near. Nymphs aren't born with elemental powers, but if they kill a Fae, they absorb all of their magic, every last drop, and then they can use it against us. Mm-hmm. They have the gift of shadows, able to drain a Fae of its powers. They do it by using probes. When they shift, their fingers grow all long and sharp and drive right into the hearts of Fae to suck out all of their power.
Diego seemed to have a morbid fascination with the idea of it, but it just made me sick to the stomach. Weird. Why would he have a morbid fascination to it?
Interesting.
Weird.
So this is also the stuff that I started picking up on when I first read it, and Samantha did too. When she was reading it, she was like, okay, why do you have so much information on this? And why are you so like morbidly curious?
And then they started talking about memory removal. Mm-hmm. It's advanced coercion. Forcing the Fae to forget. Why do you know about that? There's even rumors about some of the faculty practicing dark magic in secret. We know who that is already.
Orion.
Weird. I'm pretty sure I have a note on that says, Orion.
So then they go to tarot class. They meet Professor Astrom, which is the teacher for tarot.
Well, hang on. They're talking about the attack. And when they go to the orb, and Geraldine, this girl Geraldine was speaking to getting herself in a complete state over the attack. It's happening all over again, just like, and then she got cut off. Mm-hmm. Geraldine cut her off. She said, "Shh," casting a look at us. She forced a laugh when I caught her eye, then snatched her friend's arm and dragged her away from the table.
You find out a little bit about that later. Even
though it's not like explicitly said, you realize why Geraldine has that connection to them. And then they go into Professor Astrom's class, like you were saying.
Yep.
His eyes swiftly landed on us, and a glimmer in his gaze told me he knew exactly who we were.
Yeah.
The telling of fates through the mystical cards of the stars. So he's their tarot card reader teacher,
like almost like divination type stuff.
Yeah.
They look at cards. They look at reading tarot and dice and coins and stuff like that, which you kind of see in Ruthless Boys. But yeah, he's just like a teacher on how to speak and like get answers from the stars, pretty much.
So while they're in his class, he's teaching them how to read tarot cards. And the cards that both Tori and Darcy end up pulling are called the High Priestess.
Yep. And they pull them over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's the only card that they can pull. And they said, like, based on their notes, it says this means someone's being dishonest with you or withholding information.
He asked Darcy to kind of like really focus on the card. And she sees...
Hang on. Before that, she said, I glanced at Diego for help, but he was getting gloomy at his own card. Death.
Interesting.
And then,
so Professor Astrom asks her to like kind of like focus on the card and see if they'll give her a sign or like more information about what she's supposed to glean from it. And then, so I'll read it out. So I closed my eyes and heard Tori click her tongue with disbelief. I focused on the card. Light danced at the edges of my vision, and noise in the room suddenly fell away. Strange whispers replaced the sounds of my classmates, but I couldn't catch anything they were saying. My blood turned icily cold, and I got the strongest feeling that I was being watched. It was like yesterday in the Wailing Wood. Eyes on me, darkness pressing in, and then fire licked at my feet and closed in all around, burning, burning, burning. And then she shoots her eyes open. Professor Astrom asks her, what did the card show you? She's like, well, it was more of like a feeling. She's like a feeling of being watched, and then there was fire. And then Astrom asks to hold her hand really quickly to see if he can glean anything. His shoulder slumps, and then he gasps and kind of like jolts back, and he goes, beware of your enemies, girl. They are made of fire and shadow. And then he turns away. And Tori at this point is like, this is all just bullshit. They're just trying to freak us out. And Darcy's like, how can you say that? Like, after everything we know to be true about all this magic and everything like that, how can you say that that tarot cards are a lie?
And then that's when Tori also pulled the High Priestess. They shuffled. They pulled the High Priestess again and again and again. In the very last sentence of this, like, scene, so someone's lying to us, I whispered, and Tori nodded, belief filling her eyes as she finally bought into the art of tarot.
Yep.
And then they were on their way to their next class. As we wound through the path in air territory, the scent of the sea washed over us, and the crash of waves beyond the eastern cliff soothed my anxiety. I don't know if that's important. It just sounded important.
Then they go to their first order enhancement class with the wolves. They show up, and there's like a bunch of the different packs of Zodiac Academy there, one of which being Seth's pack. Everybody shifts into their wolf forms. Seth is actually, at this point, being kind of like nice to them almost. He drops down so Darcy can jump on his back, and then another of Seth's wolves drops down so Tori can ride on him, and they take him through the Wailing Wood, kind of like just running around everywhere, trying to see if their wolves will emerge by being around other people in the pack. This is also where they get to the end of their like running session, and they get to this big open pool of water. Everybody starts turning back into their fae forms, and Seth is kind of like flirting with Darcy, but Darcy turns and looks over her shoulder, and she sees that Tori eyes the pool with concern, taking a measured step back away from it, and my heart went out to her. She hates deep water, even a bunch of handsy naked students were going to chase her into here. So Tori's obviously staying away from the water.
That's your first glimpse of that.
Yep. And then
Seth makes them howl.
He says, you're obviously not wolves, so you can't run with us, and they just leave them
there
in the Wailing Wood.
And then Tori goes to her first professor meeting, and she just sends her everything. She like doesn't want anything to do with Tori.
Just says,
if you need
any help,
here's
let me
everything.
know.
All over email.
I have
Don't
a date.
Come and see me.
Bye.
And then she thinks that she's going on a date with Professor Orion. And then Tori just kind of needs a little bit of time. So she walks out to the Wailing Woods and finds this little clearing that's got stumps on it, but she kind of hangs out in the back.
And she hears voices
coming toward her.
So she hides.
So can I just tell you, this whole time, I'm like, Seth has to know she's there. Or not Seth, Caleb has to know she's there.
Maybe.
It never says it in the chapter, so I'm really like looking forward to reading As Told by the Boys. Because, like, how would he not know? He's a vampire. She's breathing.
Well, I mean, if you're far enough away and there's other sounds of other people breathing and he's not, like, focusing for it, maybe. But, like, if she snapped a twig or, like, gasped or something, maybe he would.
I just feel like that's weird.
Maybe. We'll see when you read As Told by the Boys. But Tori is hiding when the heirs come into this clearing. They start talking about just goofing around and giving Darius shit for marrying his second cousin or being betrothed.
Hang on. Her. So before that, there was something that just kind of felt like off to me right before the guys pulled in.
Okay.
The view of the valley was beautiful. It was an endless sea of green treetops. As I watched, a huge eagle burst out of the trees, shooting high into the sky with a cry of triumph. My lips parted as I watched the griffin circling above the forest, and my brain struggled to accept the unbelievable sight. I guess that it must have been one of the students who had shifted into their order form. Mm-hmm. Who do we know that's a griffin?
Nobody.
Yeah, we do.
Who?
Isn't Diego a griffin?
He doesn't know his order form yet. He does not know his order form yet.
That's true. I forgot that
he's in order enhancement classes just like the twins are because he doesn't know what he is. Has Orion fed from Diego yet?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Whenever that happens, there's a quote that happens right after it that I want to point out. And I can't remember if it's in book 1 or if it's in book 2.
He hasn't fed from him in this book. Anyway, I was like, why is there just a random griffin screaming in triumph?
It's just other
weird to put in there.
It's just other students in
just weird
Zodiac Academy.
Okay.
But anyway, so they're giving Darius shit about having to marry his second cousin. And then
the growth is her face, remember?
Because she's not attractive at all. And then, so after they're done giving him shit, they're like, hey, let's go back to King's Hollow, which you'll find out what that is later. But they say, hey, let's go back to King's Hollow. Darius is like, well, I'll catch up with you guys later. Like, I have something to do. And Tori's like, interesting.
No. He said that he was going to go to bed. He lied to them.
He said, let me see.
Nah, I'm B. I'll see all of you in the morning then.
Yeah, he just doesn't want to go back to King's Hollow.
Yeah, he said he was going to go to bed. But then he gets a call, I think.
I wanted to freaking point out some of these quotes from Caleb because I was just dying. You know, I like my power how I like my spirits. Caleb replies dismissively. Top shelf or nothing. I enjoy the way Tori tastes. She's got more power in her blood than even you assholes. The other three shifted uncomfortably. There's no point in denying it, he said. We all know what their potential is, which is why we need to make sure that they fail the reckoning.
Weird. And then, so Darius gets a call and said, took you long enough. I need to talk to you in person.
Oh,
no, not tomorrow.
Right before this, have a plan to
sabotage
Tori in the morning. They're just going to go fuck with her early in the morning before she gets up.
Seth wanted a snack. But he said, I need to talk to you in person. No, not tomorrow. Now. This situation is going on too long. We should have dealt with them by now. I think we need to escalate the plan. Just stop. I'm coming to yours now.
Interesting.
He knows she's there.
Darius does?
Yeah. He has to know.
No.
How does he not know? She follows him.
But he doesn't have, like, Caleb hearing or anything. He has no idea. But anyway, so she follows him out of the Wailing Wood and then over to this place called Asteroid Place. It's the faculty accommodation. She's like, oh, God, did I just follow him to meet a teacher or something?
She literally thinks in her brain. She says, his long stride and obvious desire to get to his destination meant that he was moving quickly, but he also wasn't making any attempt to check for possible tails. Rookie mistake.
Yeah.
Darius doesn't make rookie mistakes.
Yes, he does. He's used to getting his way and nobody questioning him or doing anything like that. Who would follow Darius Acrux, a dragon?
She doesn't know he's a dragon,
tail him. She doesn't know he's a dragon yet. And tail him around. Like, Nobody does that. He can do whatever the
But
fuck
yeah,
he wants.
so follows her to Asteroid Place, which is faculty admission only. Failure to comply with this rule would result in serious consequences.
He goes around to the side of the like faculty area that's kind of like blocked off by a fence.
And he's away from her for a minute. And then she finally creeps up and hears people arguing. And she sees that it's Orion.
Mm-hmm.
And all she hears is, I told you not to come here. If someone were to see you, Darius, all high and mighty Darius, says, I think you're forgetting who you're talking to, sir.
Mm-hmm. Then Orion goes, you know how much I care about this? I just don't want us to fuck this up when we're so close. Darius says, so why are we waiting? You know where they are. We could go there now and find them while they're sleeping. End this once and for all, Darius pressed, his voice low. Not yet. If we're wrong, we could end up taking innocent lives, Orion insisted. It's too hard to be sure with the information we have. Just give it a few more days. I'll see her again and I'll confirm our suspicions. And then Darius says, in a few more days, they could be even more powerful. You've seen what's happened since the start of term. The longer we give them to adjust to their power, the more chance we have of them figuring out how to harness it and turn it against us. If you're afraid that you aren't up to the job, then call on the others for help. You know they want to destroy them almost as much as we do. Orion says, it's too risky. Seth can't keep his mouth shut. He'd tell every member of his pack before sunrise, and Max's powers soften him to others no matter how much he might deny it's true. What about Caleb then? Or is your petty rivalry too keen for you to look past, even with the threat we face here, Darius says. Orion goes, it's not about rivalry. It's about strength. You know him better than me. But I judge him to be too impulsive for this. If he were to strike too soon, then all the work we have done to get to this point would be for nothing. The same goes for if we try to kill them now. Well, we still aren't sure. What if we fail and they manage to escape us? Or if we succeed and we miss something vital? It sets something greater in motion. And then Darius goes, you've been consulting with those damn
bones again. I have. And though they aren't revealing many answers to me, one thing is clear. This is not our moment. Darius fell still, releasing a long breath. Sometimes I wish we didn't live in a world where everything was mapped out for us, as if our lives are nothing more than pieces in some greater fucking puzzle and we get no say at all. And then Orion moves closer and places a hand on Darius's shoulder, which you'll see he does that. He says, is this about your father? Is he still putting pressure on you? Of course he is. It's all he ever thinks about. It's like he hasn't even noticed that the world we live in could be teetering on the edge of chaos. Don't worry about my father. I'll bear the brunt of his wrath as always. Once the heirs and I sort out that situation, he'll back off anyway. You just focus on confirming everything so that we can act. I'm meeting with her again in a few days. I'll do a reading, make sure that we have every piece of the truth.
Okay, so what do you think this is about?
I mean, it very obviously made it seem like it was about Tori and Darcy, but that's too obvious.
Okay.
And then we get into the story later. We're going to talk about this, and he's meeting with a girl.
Interesting. Yes.
Am I correct in that assumption? Okay. Mm-hmm. That's the her he's talking about.
When you see it from the boys' perspectives, you're like, it makes total sense. Like the context in book one is making it seem like Orion and Darius are after Tori and Darcy. That's what it's like trying to set it up to be.
I mean, they don't help themselves, but anyway, he says, and then, then we'll do what we have to before anyone finds out it was us. Mm-hmm. By the time I eased out of my hiding place and crept back into the woods, Darius was long gone. So she got back to her place.
She messages Darcy and says, hey, can I stay with you because the heirs are planning something for me? And Darcy's like, sure.
And then Tori says, I'm outside.
Yeah. And then Tori tells Darcy everything that she had overheard. And Darcy keeps trying to say, Orion, why? And she's like, they're hiding something. And she's like, maybe you misunderstood. And she's like, maybe, but I'm pretty sure I heard like what I heard. She's like, well, what do we do? And she goes, what about falling stars? Didn't they say something about Orion that he wasn't telling us everything? Maybe they have answers.
And so they message Falling Star. Mm-hmm. And he pretty much says anyone in the allegiance with the Acrux family is bad news.
Pretty much.
And warns them off of Darius. Mm-hmm. And then he says, I believe the House of Acrux was involved in the death of your parents. And then he sends them an article about the day that their parents died. This is where you realize that the connection of Geraldine. Because it says in there, talks about the death. They were dead. And then it says, where is it? One lead advocate of King Vega and his family, Hamish Groose, demanded that the throne be handed to the nearest royal bloodline. But with only distant cousins remaining, the 4 houses of the Celestial Council are in opposition to this proposal. Of fucking course they are.
Yeah, because they want the power. But yeah, so you realize that Geraldine's dad, Hamish, was all in favor, was apparently like close to the royal bloodline, and then was in favor of some other bloodline of the Vegas taking over instead of the 4 heirs. So they've always been loyal to the Vegas. You also, this is where it says that, I don't know if it was mentioned before, that they were supposedly killed by nymphs.
Oh yeah, nymph attack.
Which is weird that nymphs could
just break into their palace,
get into the palace and kill the king of Celeria, the queen, and their 2 daughters just by themselves.
Weird.
Interesting. No other guards, no safety things, nothing. Interesting.
Anyway, next day they're in Cardinal Magic. And one of the buttholes, Kylie, is handing out invitations to a party. Refused to give one to the girls. Orion walks in all high and mighty, takes all of the things, pretty much tells her if she ever hands out trash in her class, she's getting in trouble.
Yeah. They start talking about star signs. And Orion does a reading on Tori's palm to see her magic levels.
Well, now the girls are like questioning Orion real hard. And so like every time he does something, like she literally, after he flicked his hand and shredded the paper, she goes, "Oh my God, he could probably do that to me if he wanted to. Then why hasn't he yet?" Or like, "You don't scare me, except shit. Maybe you do." And then this is like, a lot of the stuff that he's saying in here is like super foreboding and like whole worldly, like, because he literally writes on the board, "You are not unique. Thanks, sir."
And then, so after he does the reading of Tori's
well, hang
numbers.
on. He says, "The sun and the moon, they bind us. In no order, no eyeliner or blue hair."
Darcy.
"Or beanie hat makes you different," he finished. And then he said, "Blue, Vega number 2, can you come with me?" Blue, that's becoming a nickname now. Like he's
super cute.
And then he made her come to the front, give him her palm, and he started doing her reading like he did Darcy's.
So then right after that, as soon as he hands her the paper, he, for some reason, decides to bite her wrist, Tori's. Which, like, he just catches her wrist and decides to bite it. Interesting.
Why?
Why he just, it's not like he was hungry.
And he did it so aggressively.
Yeah. So right after that, one of the students makes a Facebook post and posts a picture of Orion feeding on Tori.
Which pissed Caleb off because he had said that she is his source.
And I don't remember at this point if Orion just pretended not to realize that Caleb had claimed her, or if he was just like that ignorant that Caleb had claimed Tori. Anyway, Caleb storms to the classroom and there's a fight that ensues between him and Orion.
Where they're essentially like fighting over who's going to be their source.
Yeah. So Caleb's like, "No, Tori's mine." And then Orion goes, "Okay, well then I have Blue. But the other Vega twin is mine." And she's like, "Excuse me?" And he goes, Caleb and them go back and forth, and then they go
completely
deal.
Ignoring the girls.
Yeah. They say deal. She's like, "Do I have any say in this?" And then Tori says, "Not unless we can fight them off." So then they start talking more about star signs and how the stars come into play. So what star you're born under, also genetics, and life experience. So this all comes into play about what order you get.
One thing that I wanted to note here, it also says, to most, blue meant cold or sad, the sea, the sky. To me, it was something else, and that reason was why I wore it in my hair, as a constant reminder of that meaning. Don't forget.
And you find out what that meaning is later.
You do find out what that meaning is later.
So right after that,
Orion made her stay after class.
Yeah, tells her to stay after class. Tori's like, "I'll wait outside." So he's asking her how her shields are going.
He says You will tell me if any other vampire bites you. This is non-negotiable. I will make it known to the Academy that you're mine, and that should save us from any more incidents like today. Jesus, I can talk, I promise. I'm not likely to be challenged by anyone except Caleb, but now that has been settled, we should have no more issues. However, if another vampire happens to take a liking to you, you will tell me.
At the very end, after she's like pretty much going back and forth with him, like, I'm not yours, and he goes, and she's like, I'll fight you off one day. He goes, I know. He said, his eyes glittering, but until that day, you're mine, Blue.
That was.
So
we go into a Tori chapter next, and she's kind of talking about how she's been avoiding all of the heirs. And I think she runs into Darius, right?
Yeah, she goes to pick up parcels from their locker of things that she has ordered for them, of like clothes and stuff like that. She runs into Darius. Right. Darius is on the phone. We know that he's on the phone with his dad. She doesn't know that. Because he says, I'll get it done. Is Xavier there? Hello.
He had hung up on him.
And then whoever's on the other side, probably his dad, hung up on him. She can't figure out how to get the packages out of her locker. He ends up helping her by using her atlas. Makes a comment like, well, for me to help you, maybe you'll do like a little fashion show for me with whatever is in those packages.
Well, before he helped her, she goes, I didn't realize you were so obsessed with me. And then goes into a little thing where she's just like picking on him about being like, because he said that you're avoiding us. I haven't seen you since this day at this time. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I didn't realize you were so obsessed with me. And then she makes a comment about how his little thing with his friends to corner her didn't work out. And then he says, Darius's gaze snapped up to mine in surprise, and I offered him an insolent smile. How did you find out about that? Mm-hmm. She said, I'm used to looking out for myself. Not all of us grew up with daddy's money, keeping us safe and warm at night. He said, you don't know shit about my father or the way I grew up. And then she says, just like you don't know the first thing about me. I've met much meaner bastards than the four of you before and came out swinging. And I've learned a thing or two about the way basic bastards like you operate. You're not very original, and you don't frighten me. Mm-hmm. And then she says in her head, I was lying. And I just kind of giggled because we know.
She's just putting up a front.
And then, he comes and helps her.
Gets her packages. And then
she's expecting him to burn everything. So she literally says, looking to burn even more of my clothing. And then he says, I could be persuaded not to. Little fucker. And then makes the comment about the whole fashion show. And so she's expecting him to just destroy all the clothes that she just bought. Yeah. And then he doesn't. And he just walks out.
And she's like, okay.
She gets all her clothes.
They go to Earth class next. There's Geraldine keeps making a fuss over the twins, and she's like, I'm so Geraldine, there's a few other girls like around them. Well, as you're right for rulers, whatever, we're asking you to just stop calling them majesties, stop acting like they're like people to like fawn over.
And then they say, we want to be friends with you, Geraldine. We don't want you to.
Yeah, Darcy goes, we aren't looking for any followers. Oh, Geraldine's face drops for a moment. Then Darcy goes, but maybe we could try being friends. If a kid had woken up on Christmas Day and found out that Santa had brought them their own personal Disney World resort complete with real-life talking bunnies, their faces would not have lit up as brightly as Geraldine's did in that suggestion. So Geraldine, remember her dad was super loyal to the Vega line. She obviously is super loyal to them, and they just asked her, these two royals, if they want to be friends. So she is just ecstatic. Right after that, everybody's kind of swarming around Darcy, so Tori sneaks off to try to practice the earth magic. She sees this tunnel, so she decides to go investigate, which, really, Tori? You're just going to sneak off by yourself? She ends up running into Caleb and Seth.
It is Caleb and Seth.
Mm-hmm. Caleb ends up picking her up.
Oh.
And running her further down the tunnel so she can't like yell out to everybody. And then Caleb and Seth are kind of like taunting about like this cliff that's in the cavern, and making it seem like they're going to drop her over the edge of it. And she, in this instance, uses coercion for the first time, puts all of her power behind it, and says to pull me up. And they actually agree for just a second, and then pull her back up over the edge of the cliff.
Yeah. And then a little bit before this, when they first found her in the beginning of the caves, Caleb was like taunting her a little bit because he claimed her as the source. And then he was kind of like, you just let him do that to you, talking about when Orion bit her. And so Caleb was like, years ago, vampires would mark their sources with a tattoo right in the center of their forehead, trying to get her to say that she would tell everybody that she was his. And she said, if you come anywhere near me with a needle, I'll drive it through your fucking eye. He said, so can I assume that I have your word to announce my claim to any other vampires who show interest? She said, fine, so long as you keep any ideas about permanently marking my body off the table. I'll tell all your little buddies that my blood is spoken for. And then Seth says, you do realize that there are a lot of people who would kill for your position, don't you? Being the source of Caleb Altair is an honor. She said, well, they're welcome to have it. By all means, find another girl or guy to suck on, and I'll be on my way. And then Caleb says, I own you. I want to hear you say it, Tori. Who do you belong to? She said, go screw yourself. I don't belong to you. But the Tori Blood Bar is closed for all other business, and I'll pass the message on to any parasites who come my way. That's when he grabbed her and tore her down into the thing. And
then he, when he goes to set her down, she says, Caleb set me on my feet with a boyish grin that almost could have made me believe that he wasn't a total bastard. Ignore the dimple story. He's an award-winning Dickosaurus. She says, you're stupidly strong. He goes, I am. And he smirks and he goes, that's only my second best attribute. She goes, well, what's your best? And he goes, that would involve us ditching our clothes.
And she said, well, I won't be putting that claim to the test. Why have you brought me here?
Then they hang her over the edge. And then
she uses her coercion to bring them back up. And they say, Jesus, where was it? Shit, Seth muttered, eyeing me like he didn't know whether to attack or retreat. Caleb says, I told you how strong they were. Then she says, stay away from me. And then they go, nice try, sweetheart, but you aren't going to slip past our defenses so easily a second time.
Caleb then bites her. And at this point, Seth also comes up and is like touching her arm while Caleb is feeding, and he growls at Seth. And then he kind of like tries to play it off. He goes, don't touch my swords while I'm feeding. Seth grins at the challenge in his tone. And I felt like a bone being fought over by a pair of dogs. I'm still here, assholes. Seth goes, I'm not trying to bite her, so what's the big deal? Caleb goes, I just don't want your paws all over my food while I eat, he teased, bumping his shoulder. And
then they just
like leave her there.
Want to finish with the contest and go and do their own thing.
They just ignore her and continue.
At this point, I feel like people are testing Caleb. Like when it comes to Tori. Because why did Orion bite her? He had no reason to.
At this point, this is where Caleb really started growing on me, because I was like, because of Ruthless Boys, a
little bit about his family.
You know a little bit about Elise, and you know a little bit about Caleb's mom, and just how yes, they are political, but also family comes first, and they're very they're still fey assholes, but out of all of them, they're all about family and stuff like that too. So this is the point where you start.
Vampires are notoriously want to be alone. And in the beginning, when we first talked about it, when Darius got his elements, Caleb's mom, wasn't it Caleb's mom that tried to invite him in? She's a vampire.
Yeah.
And she wanted to love on Seth or Darius. Caleb's friend.
Yeah. So this is the part in the book where you start seeing okay, Caleb maybe isn't as standoffish
we
about
think
the
that
twins.
about other people too.
We'll get there. You're like, okay, maybe Caleb isn't as standoffish with the twins as the other heirs. At this point, he hasn't really done anything crazy, and I'll bring it up again and again because I have a bunch of different quotes from him. But at this point, he hasn't really tested the twins up as much as the other heirs. He hasn't really done anything. The only thing he's done is fed on Tori, and it's just a power source. That's a normal thing for a vampire to do. So he could be much a bigger asshole than he is currently. And Right after that, they have their first Friday night at Zodiac, and we go to a Darcy chapter. They're trying to figure out what they want to do for their Friday night, and Diego suggests we could go off campus. So they change. They run into Geraldine on the way to the orb.
I'm telling you guys right now. By the end of this series, so by January 1st, 2026, I am going to have a book of Geraldine's comments.
I've been highlighting them.
I am highlighting every single one. Are you ready for this? Jiminy Christmas, beyond the gobbledy gates, like geese for a gander. Oh, well, you look as fair as the rising dawn on a starry morn. Perhaps I'll catch you on the morrow. We can break our fast at 7:30 with a batch of the butteriest bagels. I'm no less bothered than a barnacle on a barracuda.
I've been highlighting all of her quotes too, because they're just the funniest, just mash up of sayings ever. But they run into her on their way to the orb.
And they lie to her.
And they lie to her, saying that they're not going into town because at this point she's just been this annoying ass girl and fawning over them because they're royals. And so they're like, we don't want to deal with that. We just want to go out.
They don't appreciate her
yet
in all of her advances.
So they go out on the town. They end up going to this restaurant. Diego drives them. They show up and Darcy sees that Orion is sitting at the bar. So they get a table and Darcy sees that Orion is sitting at the bar with a girl.
On the far side of the bar, Orion was sitting knee to knee with a leggy brunette who looked like Beauty on speed. Could be, I shrugged, turning in the opposite direction as I forcibly ignored the strange reaction my body was having to seeing him here. And the raging pit of death in my chest definitely had nothing to do with the Victoria's Secret model sitting opposite him.
So then they're sitting at the table. They all order alcohol. Tori's like, what the fuck? Like, do they not know that we're freshmen? And they're like, what are you talking about? And she's like, do you not have drinking ages here? And they're like, no, like if you have gold, you can buy alcohol. It's just normally kids don't have gold. So like, whatever. And Tori's like, my kind of place. So they all ordered drinks. And then Diego goes, shots, he announced, and rises from his seat.
Before that, professors are all like professors. This is like a professor hangout place, and Sophia didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And so the creepy professor, Professor Washer, comes in and says some creepy comments to them. And then it says, our tarot teacher, Professor Estrom, led him away by the arm firmly, his lips pinched together tightly in disappointment. And then later again, it comes up that he bought them drinks. And Professor Estrom is like profusely apologizing to the girls because he feels super weird about Professor Washer like hitting on them the way he is. And then by the time the waitress cleared our plates, my head was a little swimmy and I'd forgotten all about Orion and hadn't at all noticed that his hand was currently placed on his date's knee. Weird. And then, yes, Diego yells, shots.
Shots. When he goes to get shots, Geraldine is walking by and Tori's like, oh God, hide. They don't do it quick enough. Geraldine comes in and she's like,
well, bless my cream crackers. And then
I thought you were staying at the orb. And they're like, oh, we changed our mind. And she goes,
well, look at my badges.
Yeah, she shows them ass badges that she has then created.
Aren't they just the Nats pajamas?
Oh, Geraldine.
And then she sees her friends and she's like, oh, I'll be back in an hour. And then Diego returned with the shots. And then Geraldine says, oh, sweet raisin bran. And then she says, I can be back in 1 hour. Then we can all go dance in the dangle dongle together like birds of a flutter. I'm telling you, I'm making a book.
I absolutely I love her. So Diego sits down and he goes, who needs a drink? Sophia leans forward and she goes, I do. She grabs a shot and swallows it in one. Before we could lay a hand on the rest of them, she downed them all in quick succession with a wild laugh. Sophia, Diego gasps. And then Tori's like, don't worry, Sophia's a secret party girl. And then Sophia goes, I wouldn't say that, but I can handle my drink.
And then Darcy is like,
I'll go get more shots.
I'll go get more drinks. And then the only place for her to stand in line was right next to Orion and his date.
And she overhears them talking.
They say, it's all moving so fast. We should do something about it tonight. She squeezed his arm, and I tried my best not to hate her. She's on a date with a hot guy. Why wouldn't she want to jump him? Orion cocked his head. No, it's too soon. We have to wait. My eyebrows arched. Did this asshole actually have an ounce of gentleman in him? She's thinking it's about sex.
And it's not.
And then the girl says, it will get out of control, Orion. Why do I always pronounce his name like that? It has to be tonight. I can't wait any longer, she begged. Wow, desperate much? That's not what we planned, Orion hissed. If we try to kill them now, we'll draw attention to ourselves.
And she's like, oh God, it's not about sex.
Oh, fuck. And then Orion sees her.
She tries to escape.
Runs away
Yeah.
into the girl's bathroom all by herself. And then he walks in and she's like, oh, shit, I messed up.
He's like, what did you hear?
He coerced her into telling him what she heard. And she tells him, and he
she's like, you're planning on killing us. Like, you're not going to get away with it. All these things.
And he's like, oh, that's it?
She's like, yeah, isn't it enough? And he's like, go home, Blue. And then he just leaves her there. She goes back to the table, and Sophia is like, where's our drink? She slurred with a pout, but Tori shushed her. She tells Tori about Orion. She just says that he was a problem.
Sophia laughed. Come on. He's a teacher. You guys are getting way too caught up in conspiracy theories.
And then Tori asks Darcy if she wants to go home, and she's like, no, that's what he wants. And then Sophia's like, well, he's gone now anyway. And she starts dancing provocatively.
And pushes her
Chair
table
back.
over, knocks over a thing.
Yeah.
It was only a few shots, I said in confusion. Maybe she doesn't drink often, Diego said, rising to his feet. I should take her home. Weird, right? Why is the shots that Diego got them
just 4 shots
pushing over this girl that said that she can handle her drinks,
and she drinks,
and now he's interrupting her and saying he needs to take her home after she's talking about the fact that she should have been able to handle 4 shots? Weird.
Interesting.
He's a little bitch.
So right after that, Diego takes Sophia home, and then Tori goes. They're drinking, and Tori gets a message from Falling Stars saying, "New information has come to light. Can we meet?" And so then they say, "Sure." When? He says 10 minutes. There's an alleyway behind the bar. He automatically knows where they are. He says, "I'll see you there." So they decide to go out into the alleyway. And it kind of looks like a slasher film. Like they're like, this would be how we died because we're meeting in an alleyway behind.
This is a murderer's wet dream is what they say. A serial killer's wet dream, something like that.
As they're waiting, they're
Falling Star messages them again.
Tori goes, I don't like this. Maybe we should just leave. And then her phone buzzes and Falling Star messages them and says, the shadow is moving closer. I can't risk a meet now. You should find a way to safety before the darkness claims you. And they're like, what the heck? We should get out of here. They see a figure at the end of the alleyway. And it's silent for a little bit because they ask, who is that? Who are you? Whatever. Who's there? And then the silence echoed for several long seconds. Then a deep rattling noise came from the shadow. As the shadow is stalking closer, this rattling noise keeps going off. And when they try to summon their power, they can't. So they take off sprinting and running. And as this figure is chasing them and making this rattling noise, they can't summon their power. And they're also getting not like lethargic, but like tired. Like they can't. The third rattle was so loud that my limbs trembled in response to it. I didn't know what it was, but it felt like it was forming a cage around my power and locking it up tight. The next step I took felt weighted with lead, and I sucked in a sharp breath as I realized that the noise was starting to harness my limbs too. If we didn't get out of here quickly, I was sure we wouldn't be able to escape at all. So they run by dumpsters, knocks one of the things over and hits it with it. As soon as the rattle stops, Darcy then can cast air at the figure. But then the rattle noise happens again. And they see the exit though. Locks down their power, so they run for the exit of the alleyway. As they burst into the... Hang on, before that, while he's chasing them, the figure stood, shadows seeming to cling to them as if they were drawn closer by a magnet. Darkness concealed everything about them, apart from the certainty in my gut that there was something horribly wrong with them. The rattling began again, and I clapped my hands over my ears, not understanding what the hell it was, but knowing that it was doing something to me each time I heard it.
And then they got out.
They run out of the alleyway into this crowded street. They run straight into Max. And he goes, what's got our two little Vegas so worked up? Darcy's like, someone was chasing us. He's like, really?
He's a siren, so he's pulling it out of them.
Mm-hmm. She's like, they were trying to hurt us. And he's like, well, it sounds like a good story to be told over a drink. So then he takes them to the other heirs in this bar. And he says, look who I just found running from shadows.
Hang on. I LOL a lot right here because it was like, sirens would probably make a killing as psychiatrists when like someone to suck the misery out of them every now and then. I laughed so hard. I was like, weird. That feels like a plot point. If you haven't read Ruthless Boys, that's where that's from. Yeah. There's a killing psychiatrist.
Yeah, so he takes them to the other heirs. He sits them down. He says, look who I just saw running from shadows. Darcy's like, we weren't running from shadows. Somebody was chasing us. And Seth goes, well, you really must have been scared if you thought we were the better option. And Max is like, they really are. I can taste their fear. So
they kind of tell him about it. And then the boys want them to stay because they want to hear more about their story. So they're like, one drink.
One drink. Tori's like, okay, one drink. And at this point, Max is kind of pulling the story out of Darcy. He's like rubbing her arms and using his siren gifts to get her to tell him what happened. Tori downs her drink in one thing because Darius is kind of like holding her.
Well, she's sitting on Darius's lap.
Yeah. She downs her drink in one, and then she stands up, and he looks confused and like is trying to pull her back, and she's like, turns her back on him. Darcy's like, well, we're gonna leave.
Yep. She was like, there's your one drink. We're going.
And then as they're leaving, they had previously called a truce on their issues, their political things, when they first sat down. And Kayla made a comment saying, like, I'm not going to bite you, whatever, to get them to talk about their thing. So then as they're leaving,
they asked where they were going. She says, dancing. You can always join us if you think you can keep up.
That's what I was going to say.
And so they go to the next bar, and they're like, let's find us some free drinks. So they're like trying to find willing guys to buy them drinks.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start to introduce themselves. And then all you hear is no from Max. And then Caleb says, not happening. And grab the girls.
Max. No.
And then Max, she said, la, 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 la. Why are you drinking at the bar when we have the VIP section over to ourselves over there? She says, I think you just answered your own question there. Max chuckled at his friend's expense, and I raised an eyebrow at him in surprise. You're going to have to work a lot harder to get into this one's pants.
Mm-hmm. Never going to happen, I said.
Weird.
If we aren't going to be drinking, then we should be dancing, is what Darcy says. So they go to the floor and they start dancing. At one point, Tori feels hands on her, and she realizes Darius is behind her, so they're dancing together. She looks over at Darcy, and she sees that Darcy is dancing with Seth, and he's, like, all over her, like, nuzzling into her hair, and she's, like, weird. She doesn't seem too, like, put off by his wolfish tendencies right now, because he's, like, cuddling all over her. At one point, Caleb shows up with a drink.
Well, Tori and Darius were almost kissing.
Yeah.
And then Caleb, of course, shows up with drinks.
And then he says, Orion's looking for you.
Hang on. Right before that. He was rude and arrogant and full of himself. There was no way in hell I'd be ending up in his bed tonight. I was at least 67% certain of that.
When Tori starts drinking, her decision
bad boy meter.
Her decision making just goes right out the window, and she's like, bad boys?
She talks about it later, too.
Uh-huh. So he shows up with the drink. He says,
Orion's waiting for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so Darius goes to him.
Something about an assignment that you haven't turned in, and Darius is like, uh-huh.
Sure,
so Orion.
Darius goes over to Orion. Orion is staring at Darcy. Darcy has no
idea because she's dancing with Seth.
So they leave. and she starts dancing with Caleb.
And then she goes, did you hate Orion before he tried to poach my blood, or is this all about me? And he tells her it's a vampire thing. She's like, if either of you wanted anything other than my blood, then maybe I'd be flattered. But as I'm rather against the whole concept of being a walking juice box, I'll have to go with the no. And he goes, what if I did want something other than your blood?
Caleb also says, I should respect him because he's a professor at my school and is technically my superior, but I'm more powerful than him.
Mm-hmm. So technically he could fight for also having Darcy's blood and stuff like that too, but he's just letting him have it. She goes like, what? Asking like what other thing he would want besides her blood, acting all innocent. And he goes, what if I wanted to? And then he gets cut off because the lights of the club abruptly come up.
All students are told to go home. Mm-hmm. And then she gets a message. Darcy gets a message from Falling Star that says, I should have warned her too.
And they're like, what the heck? And the doors fly open of the bar. Somebody screams, Geraldine Gruss has just been attacked. They're saying she might die.
So the girls go try to find her. They sneak out a back entrance. And then they hear a paramedic saying, you saved her life to Orion.
It's a good thing you found her before the attacker could finish what they started.
He says, I was only just powerful enough. I haven't got a drop of magic left. So guess what's about to happen? Tori immediately was like, oh, shit.
Tries to grab Darcy away from the situation, but Orion sees them move out of the corner of his eye.
And he runs to her and starts feeding from her. And then Tori is like, stop. You've had enough. And
because
he doesn't stop.
Because he's not stopping. Which
he's depleted.
If you've read Ruthless Boys, you understand that like sometimes
the blood haze,
when vampires are depleted from magic, they can go into like this haze or like this like a hunting mode, depending if they're chasing somebody or if they're depleted from magic and they just need to like drink a lot of blood. Sometimes they lose control, and it takes a lot to like come back from that. So Tori is like, stop, like you're all not done. Stopping, and he then turns to her.
Well, no, she used fire on her hands and burnt through his shirt. And so he finally let her go.
And he goes, maybe you want to donate to the cause then? And then a heavy arm landed around my shoulders as Caleb appeared, and he released a deep growl into the back of his throat. You might want to rethink that statement, Professor. Orion stared at them for a couple seconds, and then he released a heavy breath. I haven't been drained at that low in a long time. I shouldn't have tried to take so much all at once. Doesn't say sorry. And Darcy is like, well, feel free to just steal all of mine then, she says icily back to him. He's like, I'll take you guys back to school. And Darcy's like, we're not going anywhere with you. He's like, don't be ridiculous. And he tries to grab her. Tori steps in between Darcy and Orion, and so does Caleb.
Joins her.
Caleb is right shoulder to shoulder with frickin' Tori. And Tori goes, you don't fucking touch her again. Orion's eyes narrowed, but he kind of like drops it.
Well, because he looked at Darcy and she said asshole. And then they turned and left. He only dropped it because he saw the venom in Darcy's gaze.
Caleb says, you can take the bus back with us. He kind of like leads them straight onto the bus, which is packed, and tells 3 other students to move. And they sit in the back of the bus with Max
and Caleb and Seth. We're all back there, and the girls.
And this is where Tori goes, I realized one person had never reappeared among all of the mayhem. The last person to see him was now covered in blood and was discovered at the scene of the crime. So where was Darius Acrux? Interesting. Then they
go into a Darcy chapter where she wakes up the next morning and all she can think about is Geraldine. Yeah. And she says Geraldine had been hurt in Orion. He'd been covered in blood and completely drained of power. And then she's about to leave her room and Seth
shows up.
About to knock. He says, morning, babe. Let me help you with that. He dries her hair for her. And then he's like flirting really hard.
And she goes, why are you pretending to be nice to me? We've played this game before and I'm not falling for it, Seth. And he goes, fuck, do that again. He said, biting down on his fist. What? I stared up at him in confusion. The part where you say my name like you're mouth humping it? That's not a thing. I shook my head. She says, I need to go see Geraldine. And then he goes, yeah, it sounds like she was pretty messed up. And then she goes, lucky Orion was there to help. And he goes, we have a serious problem, babe. She's like, what is that?
And she's freaking out thinking it's something with Geraldine.
And he goes, you just mouth humped another guy's name? She's like, are you kidding me right now? And he goes, no, this is no joke. You can't date teachers, right? Them's the rules. And I appreciate it if you don't mouth hump his name right in front of me. She's like, can you please stop saying the word mouth hump? It's not a thing. And he goes, it's a thing. I just made it a thing. She goes, you're impossible. And then he starts walking with her
She says, last night we were drunk because he was like, he kind of apologized. He said, after last night, I just thought things had changed, but clearly I was wrong. She said, last night we were drunk. He said, I know, but so what? I still know how I feel this morning. Don't you? And he apologized.
He said, I'm sorry, all right, for your first night, for trying to make you cut off your hair and then covering you in mud with the boys, posting it online, and then leaving you in the wailing. I got it. I cut over him. I remember it all pretty clearly. I just thought after last night. And then that's when she's like, yeah, we were drunk. And he's like, but I know how I feel still. She's like, I don't trust you. And he goes, can I try to make you trust me? And she's like, no. And then he makes puppy dog eyes. And she goes, ugh, fine. And he goes, kiss. And she's like, no. And she goes, are you crazy? And he goes, crazy for you. And she's like, that's the cringiest thing I've ever said or I've ever heard. And he goes, yeah, actually, don't repeat that to anyone, babe. Street cred and all.
And then they run into Diego. And she makes Seth leave. And he says, tell me you didn't sleep with that mutt. She says, of course not. He said, then why is he all over you? Apparently he wants to be friends. Just don't buy into any of his bullshit, okay? She says, I won't. So how's Sophia? He says, she's still sleeping. And then she kind of raised an eyebrow at him. And he was like, nothing happened. I slept on the floor, but she didn't want to be alone. What exactly happened last night? The rumors going around are loco. I don't know what to believe. And she told him all about it. This fucker already knew what happened.
And then they go to
I don't trust Diego.
They're talking about going to see Geraldine. They go up to Washer, and he says that she's in the Uranus infirmary. As they're exiting, they run into Kylie. Kylie shows Darcy a picture of her dancing with Seth and Tori dancing with Darius. She's like, ah, shit. But, like, she gets why Kylie is upset because technically Kylie is dating Seth. And so she's like, I understand. I would be upset too. And Margaret's also upset at Tori. And she's like, do you think he's actually interested in you? He was drunk and he grabbed the nearest thing with a pulse. And Tori goes, if that's Darius' standard now, then I understand why he's with you. Kylie slaps Darcy, and Tori goes, do you want to fight them? And Darcy's like, no, I'm completely drained. And Tori's like, fucking asshole, Orion. And then they decide to run instead. Then they get to...
We're in a Darcy chapter. Remember this? They left. They went into the infirmary. And she's thinking... We headed deeper into the building, the way lit by flaming torches. My skin prickled with heat and a deep tingle flooded my body. We are in a Darcy chapter, so it's not just Tori that is feeling the heat.
From flames and replenishing magic.
Which she doesn't realize that she's replenishing magic.
Yeah, they don't understand how their magic is being replenished.
I am thoughtfully assuming that that's what's happening right here. So they see Geraldine, and then they realize the nurse is like, no, I can't let you see her. And then she's like, and has an ass pin on her.
She's like, but I'll make an exception. So she lets them see Geraldine. Geraldine says,
gambling gooseberries.
It's so cute. Then they say, like, do you remember anything? Like, what happened? And she says, I took a shortcut down the alley toward Odyssey Bar. I figured that's where you would have headed. But as I was walking, I heard this terrible noise, a sucking, rasping, rattling noise. And I got such a fright, I dropped all of my bagels. My badges. So I knelt. I just assumed it was bagels. My brain just goes straight to that. So I knelt down, gathering them all up when a shadow fell over me. Then something cut into me right between my shoulder blades like a knife or a pitchfork. I'm not sure. But the pain was unbearable. Then everything fell dark and someone was kneeling over me and my magic was draining away so fast. It was like being sucked right out of me. All I remember is this scent.
Cinnamon.
So after they leave, Darcy turns to Tori and she goes, it's Orion, I hiss. He smells like that. But Tori goes, he said he helped Geraldine. And Darcy goes, but what if he didn't? And what about Darius? The two of them left the bar together, and whoever it was must have been after us before. We heard the same weird noise. Tori goes, how can we be so sure? And she goes, we confront them next time we see them.
And then she says, my magic returned. I wasn't sure how or when, but Sunday morning I noticed the keenness of his presence and was fairly sure it had replenished at some point on Saturday. Weird.
Interesting.
So she goes into Orion's thing for their teacher-student session.
Mentoring session.
And he tests her. He says, stand on the desk with coercion. And she is able to
block it.
And then he said, good, let's get on with tonight's session. And she's like trying to like quiz him and like interrogate him. And she starts out with, Geraldine's doing better. He says, yes, thank the stars. She can go back to annoying us all by perching about the true heirs. He actually air quoted it and I pursed my lips. Any idea who attacked her? Whatever I know or do not know about that incident is none of your business. And then he asked how order enhancement was coming along. She goes, well, I know I'm not a werewolf. And then he says, yes, a great way to figure out if you're a werewolf is dancing with one of them like you were paid for it.
Jealousy much?
She says, and I suddenly felt too hot and the seat felt too hard. I shifted nervously, his ridiculing tunneling through my body. I didn't have an answer to that. He picked up a pen and rolled it between his fingers, swiveling side to side in his chair. His eyes never left mine, like he was trying to drill his way into my mind and pick out all of the information he wanted. And screwing him didn't bring out the wolf in you either, he asked calmly, rationally, like he had the right to ask that, like he wasn't my damn teacher and it wasn't so inappropriate I wanted to scream. She says, I didn't, and it would be none of your business if I did. And then he scooted closer to her.
And he says, it's my business as your liaison to look out for you. The heirs will chew you up and spit you out, Miss Vega. Just a friendly warning.
And then she says, funnily enough, sir, I've taken an interest in your business too. And then she goes on this whole rampage.
Accusing him, trying to come up, like telling him that she has all this evidence.
And then she says, oh, and who happens to be the first on the scene? You, covered in blood and smelling like cinnamon. He goes, cinnamon? Yes, I said firmly. Geraldine smelled it, and that's what you smell like. So, and he says, and how many people have you told about this?
Enough to know that if I go missing, the whole student body will know about it before midnight.
And then he pulls up an article. Wounds on Zodiac Academy student now confirmed as a nymph attack. Professor Orion is expected to be awarded the Nobel Crest after his act of bravery saved her moments before her death.
She's like, oh. So then she goes to leave and he stops right in front of her. And she says, don't. And he's like, I wasn't going to bite you. Stay. Finish the session. And she goes, will you answer something for me first? And he goes, depends on what it is. And she goes, do you want me and my sister dead? His eyes softened and he goes, no, Blue, I don't. It's so cute. Then we go into a Tori chapter.
So there's a dance coming up. Everybody's kind of buzzing about it, talking about it. And she needs to go into a session with Darius, which he avoided her last one. Professor Pyro is on Darius's side and like is mad at Tori because she didn't reschedule with him. So she's at this one waiting on him, and
he doesn't show up.
A guy named Justin Masters walked up to her and is like,
I'm
a senior, but my family served yours loyally right up until the devastating fall of your bloodline. I just wanted to tell you how deeply sorry I am for the tragedy your family befell. And he's like going on and on about your majesty, blah, 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 and then doesn't even know her fucking name, calls her Darcy.
And he asks her to the dance. But remember the name, Justin Masters. He shows up all the time. Okay. The rest of the series.
I figured that's why I highlighted his name. But essentially, Darius never fucking shows. She has this theory about her uniform that she's forced to wear in fire class. She thinks that it is hindering her ability to control her magic.
To control her flames specifically. Because it's a fire-resistant uniform. So she's like,
I have this innate feeling like that my fire would not hurt me. Like it's mine. And so she's not wearing it and she's controlling it pretty well. And she's like, there's merit to this. But Darius never shows and it pisses her the fuck off. So she grows balls
to confront him, storms into Ignis' house, asks people where he is. They say that his room is at the top floor. She goes to knock and he just says it's open, like super friendly. And
not thinking that it's her.
Yeah. And then So she walks in and he's laying on his bed surrounded by gold. And she goes,
if you read Ruthless Boys, you already know why, because dragons replenish with gold. Okay.
So if you've seen Ruthless Boys,
you'll know that that's how dragons replenish their magic. And so, but Tori has no idea. So she goes, do you have a pirate fetish or something? He's like, what? Well, you're half naked in a bed full of coins. So either you're doing something with them or putting them somewhere inaccessible while fully dressed, or I missed the memo about your enrollment in Captain Silver's new fleet. He goes, you don't really know anything, do you? This is how my kind regenerates our power from gold. Oh, so are you order of pirate then? Do you transform into a one-legged man with an eye patch, a hankering for rum, and a pet parrot? And then he goes, what the hell are you doing in my room? And she's just pissed off because he missed her session with her, because she just wants to learn how to use her fire and how to control it.
She keeps saying, come to my session like you promised, and he keeps saying no.
He says, the only possible reason I can imagine for you to be stupid enough to come bursting in here would be that you finally come to realize who truly deserves to rule Solaria, and that being the case, I imagine you are about to bow down low and praise me and the other heirs as your kings. Keep dreaming. I'm here because you missed yet another one of our tutoring sessions. Blah, 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 blah.
She then makes fun of him, pretty much is like poking at him for only having 2 elements when she has 4. And he's like, no, 2 are more than enough. And she's like, yeah, but having all 4 has got to be better, right? And then he goes, I'm an apex predator. My kind aren't built to take orders from anyone. It's written into my DNA to rule over you. And I could never bow no matter how powerful you might have the potential to be.
And then he says, no one is higher up the food chain than me, Roxy.
And she's like, what order are you? And he goes, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. And she's like, I don't know my order yet.
Professor Orion thinks growing up in the mortal world suppressed our abilities.
So then he starts unbuckling his pants, and she's like, what are you doing? And he goes, when you stop eye fucking me, I'll show you what you're so desperate to know. Then he leans closer to her, and he goes, if you come into my room uninvited again, then it had better be because you're ready to bow to us or to beg me to bend you over that headboard and make you scream my name. And then he turns away from her, suddenly takes a running jump out of the open window and shifts into his golden dragon form. And then she goes, my mouth fell open in shock as I stared at the glorious beast of legend as Darius gave a few flaps from his powerful wings. Each one of his scales glimmered in the light. And then she goes,
my gaze stayed locked on him as he tore through the skies, and I found myself desperate to join him in the clouds. And then at the bottom, he was power and heat and war wrapped up in a single being. He'd fight to the death to maintain what was his, and while we remained at this academy, we were a threat. But for the first time since I'd arrived here, watching him soar through the skies sparked something in me. It was like a primal ache to rise to the challenge he presented. I didn't want his throne or his kingdom, but I did want something else from him. I wanted his respect. And with that knowledge, I knew I'd never bow to him. So if he was determined to see me fall, he was going to have to try and make me break.
It's so cute. He's like, I will never bow to you. And he jumps out the window, and she's like,
Understand.
I
get it, but
I will
not bow to you either.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make you respect me. Like, so cute.
And then we go into a Darcy chapter.
And it's
Siren Enhancement class.
So they found out they're not werewolves. Now they're seeing if they're sirens. They're just sitting in the group around a bunch of other sirens, and they're just discussing siren powers.
But they're like using them on the girls, and then
it gets to the point where it's
supposed to be happiness, but then one of Max's friends is over next to her, and he's like trying to incite something else in her, and he's like, she was like, I was out in town drinking with my friends, and he goes, what else? And then she goes, I saw Professor Orion. I frowned, but the blonde guy squeezed my flesh, a wave of their power calling me to keep going, and my words kept flowing. He was angry. He's so hot when he's angry. And then some of the group moaned, and the teacher was like, enough. We're not doing lust today.
And then the professor comes over to apologize. She says you have to keep your wits about you. And then the professor sighs, and Darcy jerks away from her. She goes, hey. She's like, why is everyone after these emotions? And why am I even turned on by the Lord Voldemort's hotter younger cousin? Saying that she's Orion is
his hotter younger cousin.
Yeah. So then she says sorry. They all go away. And
they try to leave. They're like, we are obviously not sirens. Let's try to get out of the class. And then Max saunters over and gets both girls to tell him their biggest fears.
Yeah, he says, how's my favorite twins? Come sit down with me. And then he says, yeah, what's your biggest fear, Tori? And she says, my ex-boyfriend was driving me home late one night. We'd been fighting and he kept shouting at me. I told him to shut up and watch the road. He was driving like a maniac. We were heading back from the weekend in Wisconsin. The roads were so dark and he wouldn't slow down. He took a turn too fast and we veered off the bridge and crashed into the river below. Yeah. Car sank so fast and my ex, he got out. He left me, just swam to the riverbank. I couldn't get my seatbelt undone and I panicked. The air was running out and it was so dark. I couldn't feel my fingers through the cold. I was going to die stuck in that shitty car. Luckily, a farmer had seen us swerve off the road and he came and he swam out and cut the belt. He saved me, but since then I can't go in deep water. It frightens the hell out of me.
And then he turned to Darcy and was like, what's yours? And hers is pretty much abandonment.
Yeah.
Like every person that has...
Every foster family has abandoned them.
And then...
she had dated a guy.
She fought against his power, her heart squeezing with the memory. It was mine and I didn't want to share it. I didn't even want to relive it in my own head, but Max like pulled it out of her. So she started dating a guy in school. They dated for about 3 months. He got her to sleep with him at a party and then immediately broke up with her.
She says he dumped
literally
me
5
seconds after he got what he wanted. As she was leaving the party where he had gotten what he wanted, she tripped and fell over her own feet and skinned her knee and saw that it was black and blue. And so then she says, so I dyed my hair the color of that bruise, black and blue, my own personal wound. So my deepest fear is being cast aside, my heart crushed by trusting blindly again. So I'll never let anyone in.
And then Max left them. He was essentially like, thanks for the meal. Bye. And it took a lot out of them
because
to talk
it's
about
also
that.
Draining magic. Not just the emotions, it's also draining their magic. That's how sirens replenish. So,
and then
they
went to eat. Seth caught her eye and came over to her.
He's like, "Why are you ignoring me?" And he like sits down with her at the table, at the ass table. Tori is pretty much like, "Why are you acting like you like Darcy?" And Darcy, after just saying this old wound of hers, she's like, what the fuck, Tori? And Tori's like, I didn't mean it like that. And Seth is like, well, what would you mean it like, Tor? And then Darcy scoots closer to Tori, taking like solidarity with her twin. And Seth hands her a note and he goes, read it when you're on your own. Diego's like, please tell me you're not with that guy. And then Margaret's voice cuts out over the crowd and she's yelling with Darius. Darius is breaking up with her in front of everybody. She's making a big scene. And then Seth says something.
Hang on. Before all of that.
What?
When Tori says that, she says, I didn't mean that. And he goes, what did you mean, Tor? She says, don't try that bullshit. We're twins. Nothing gets between us. And that was when Darcy moved closer to her. And then, yes, the whole stuff with Marguerite. And then, so Darius was essentially like, I don't want you anymore. And she made a big, huge thing about it.
And then Darius is like, she's like, but you love me. And Darius is like, love you. At one point in our once a week bed parties, did you get that idea? Seth starts laughing. And Kylie goes, you're no better. I saw that video of you and Darcy fucking Vega at the bar last night. And Seth is like, sorry, did I forget to ask your permission? And she's like, no, Seth, you never, he says, I'm polyamorous. You know that, right? And she's like, no, you never told me that. And he's like, no? Well, you can't go poly shaming me now, can you? And Max starts laughing. And she's like, you're lying. And Max is like, you want to say that again? And Kylie goes, he's not polyamorous, Max. He's just cheating on me. And the heirs leave. And then Margaret turns to the twins and says it's all about them. And Tori's like, bitch is incoming. So they decide to leave the orb.
So she says, bitch is incoming. And then they get to the table. And they pick up the table with air and the four. So Sophia, Diego, Tori, and Darcy get flung backwards. And they light it on fire and slam it against the ground. And they say, get out of Zodiac, Vega sluts. But not before she had pulled Kylie had pulled the note out of Darcy's pocket. And it said, be my date for the dance. Kylie was pissed. So they left the orb and like slammed doors, and it was just like a like kind of a trauma moment for them because like that was the first time. It's not the first time, but they got like attacked by the girls. They couldn't do anything about it.
So the next chapter is Tori's, and she's leaving to go somewhere and hears them coming.
Yeah, she's going to go take a nap because she was tired and stuff is messing with her sleep schedule. So she's going down the hall and someone knocked into her and knocked all her books on the floor. And she was picking them up and she heard Margaret's voice. She was like, hurry up. That jumped up little boyfriend thief is going to be here any second. And we need to get every moment of this on camera. I didn't think you and Darius were officially dating. He belongs with me. Anyone with eyes can see that. And then you hear Kylie say, careful with that Pegasus shit. Planning to go, she goes, I straightened and half turned away from the stairwell, planning to go the long way around and avoid whatever glittery shit-filled hell they had planned for me. But instead, she's like, I've never one to back away from a fight. I can't take them all on. But she used water magic to throw all of the glitter back up at them and flood the stairwell. Yeah. And she heard them screaming. And so she took the fuck off. She hears them behind them and she sneaks into a classroom and listens to them go by. And then, she hears someone say, hiding from someone. And Caleb was in the classroom just sitting by himself. She goes, well, damn, I've run straight from a pack of hyenas into the mouth of a crocodile. He goes, not a lion? She said, oh, no, they hunt together. You don't strike me as the type to need any help in cornering your prey. He said, sometimes it comes right to me without having to do a thing. And then he kind of like, so he's going to come eat her. He's going to
eat her.
You know what I mean? He's going to come bite her and feed on her.
Yes, they're kind of just like flirting back and forth.
Yeah. So she goes, shall we just get this over with then? Caleb's gaze slid to my neck before trailing lower as he took in my curves, a different kind of hunger lighting his navy eyes. Slowly, he pushed himself to his feet, and I stopped a foot away from him. You know, I could feel your power, he breathed, leaving the space between us empty. She goes, any idea what I am? He goes, sadly not. I can only feel the depth of your power, the strength of it, and you're strong. Once you learn to harness it, I have the feeling that I won't be able to take an ounce of it from you without permission. She goes, why the hell would I ever give you permission? And then he goes, you're an heir too. If you make it past the reckoning and complete your training here, then the chances are that we will be in each other's lives for a very long time, which is like the first time that any of the heirs have ever acknowledged that they could make it past the reckoning, because that's their whole fucking goal, is to make them not get past it. So Caleb doing that was like a pretty big step for me, like for him in my books, because he's just being a little cutie.
She then goes, I thought the whole point of your little boys club was to make sure me and my sister didn't make it through the reckoning. Don't you want us gone? He starts.
He says, I'm interested to see how this whole thing will play out. Perhaps you'll fail and be gone by the end of the semester. Or perhaps you'll rise up and claim your birthright. Before your parents were killed, our families were their celestial counselors. We always would have held the power beneath you if things hadn't gotten so messy with the Savage King. So maybe you'll fail the reckoning and be sent back to your boring mortal lives. Or maybe the trials you're enduring now will only make you stronger in the end, and you'll pass. She goes, so in other words, you're just going to keep going along with the other heirs and their stupid stunts, and whenever you're feeling peckish, I'm still fair game. He said, pretty much. And then she goes, can you just get this over with? I have a lot of studying to do. Don't you want to hear my proposition? I can't imagine anything you could offer to make me a willing participant in your dinner schedule. He goes, there may be one thing. Before I could demand an answer, he caught my chin between his fingers and pressed his mouth to mine. And she did not push him away.
So then they're making out.
He starts sliding his hands up her legs.
She opens his shirt and
she invites him.
Encourages him. He ends up getting her off. And
she says, why? You can just take what you want from me, so why kiss me? He said, I can take your blood and power from you, but I desire more than that. And I'm a Taurus. When we set our minds on something, it's not easy to turn us from it. And that's when she started opening his shirt. He goes, you didn't seem so against the idea the other night. She said, that was drunk Tori. She's notorious for making bad decisions. He goes, and you think I'd be a bad decision? She says, I've been with enough bad decisions to recognize them. And then he goes, how many exactly? I was like, Caleb. She goes, enough to let me know that this is a terrible idea. Probably not enough to put me off entirely. So yeah, they do their thing. He
gets her off, and then he goes, right as soon as she finishes, he steps back an inch, and he goes, I have a student coming in a minute to learn the art of vampirism from an expert.
He admitted reluctantly.
And she goes, so that was purely for my benefit? And he goes, oh no, I got plenty from that too. Then sucks his fingers clean. And she goes, you're still going to bite me, aren't you? And he goes, well, you could look at it as rewarding me for my efforts. And she goes, well, that makes me feel a little bit better about leaving you with blue balls. He goes, next time I'll be sure to carve out a few hours to dedicate to you. And then neither of us will be left wanting.
And then he starts talking about the dance, and she's like, he is not going to ask me to the dance. I would not want to go with him. And he goes, why don't you blow it off? Was he trying to save her?
Mm-hmm. You'll see it in the boys' perspective, but he specifically goes, why don't you blow it off? She blinks at him in surprise. She goes, what possible reason? And he goes, because then I could sneak out and come to your room. We could have the whole house to ourselves, the entire evening to ourselves. That's pretty presumptuous of you. And she goes, Earth Boy. And he goes, Earth Boy. And then brings the flower to life in his palm and hands it to her. She goes, perhaps I've gotten what I wanted from you now. And he lets the flower dissolve. And he goes, I'm confident you'll come back for more. And then another student walks in. But yeah, he was like, skip the dance.
Reading the other part, I did not take anything from this. But now I'm like, that makes sense. He wanted to save her.
You'll see it in the boys' perspective too. And I'll bring it back up.
And then, yeah, the door behind this open. And then he bites her. And one thing they say is, I flinched in surprise and fought back the urge to whimper in response to the pain as he fed on me. Is there usually pain?
Yeah.
Is there?
So, sometimes they can make it nicer, but yeah, there's normally some sort of pain.
His hand fisted in my hair to hold me in place, and I gritted my teeth as I wrote it out. And then he says, lesson 1 for today, because the other student had walked in, always prey on the most powerful creature you can overpower. Tori here hasn't got a lock on her magic yet, so she's currently fair game. Although, unluckily for you, I've already claimed her as my source, so keep your fangs off. And then Tori says, lesson 2. Don't underestimate the depths of vengeance. My sister and I have more power than a lot of you, and you'd be fools to think we won't remember what we went through while we were getting the grips to handle it. And then, as she's leaving, he goes, until next time, Tori.
So then it's the dance. Darcy's wearing a cute navy dress. Tori's wearing a dark black one.
Seth meets up with her and is like, hey, babe. He said, I'd planned to walk to you all the way from your room, but you weren't there. And she's like, I never accepted your invitation.
Yeah.
And then he goes, what does she say? Oh, I thought that note must have been meant for your girlfriend and somehow ended up in my pocket instead. And he's like, I think she got the message now. It's over. She goes, I thought you were polyamorous. He goes, I'm definitely the amorous part. And then she says, no, I'm going with my sister.
And he's like, ooh.
Twincest.
She goes, you're twisted. And he goes, real twisted. Want to find out how much back in my room?
And then Diego puts his arms around all three and is like, can I pretend you're all my dates? And Tori and Darcy slide out and they're like, no. But Sophia stays right where she is. And he goes, you're not going anywhere. And then you better make sure you don't drink so much and have to duck out early again. And then Sophia says, I can handle my drink. There was something wrong with those shots. Like the fact that you couldn't handle so many of them? No, like they were too strong, or there was something else in them, or, come on, guys, let's stop teasing her and just enjoy our night.
Diego cuts her off. Yep.
Motherfucker.
So then, as soon as they're walking into the dance, Falling Star messages the girls and says, our stars are finally in alignment. It's time we meet. I'm waiting in the library. They decide to go meet up. And when they get there, a person walks out, and it's Professor Astrom. He says, girls, I'm so sorry for not revealing myself sooner. I was a good friend of your mother's. Marissa loved you both very dearly. Is that why she dumped us in the mortal world to fend for ourselves?
Is that why she stole 2 twins to take our place and they died because of it? And then he goes to talking about how he uses the cards that she had bound them to him, so they went to him when she died. And that's what he's been using to kind of predict a lot of the things that have been happening. And then, so they told him that they a dark conspirator was pulling the strings behind the murders. The nymphs were just pawns in a much bigger game. No nymph would have gotten into the royal palace without help. And though they receive fae power when they kill, rarely do they learn to harness it well enough to attack our kind with skill. They were trained by fae. And now that you have returned, I believe whoever controlled the nymphs before is doing so again. I have long suspected Lord Acrux, and now I think his son has taken up the torch too, with the help of Orion, a man whose family has deep roots in dark magic. We knew that already. The girls just figured that out. He said, the attacks are starting again, and both Darius and Orion are linked to every scene, and each death is occurring frighteningly near to you both. If they are somehow controlling the nymphs to try and... There was a creak somewhere. Sweat beaded on his brow. He pulled a card and said, someone is listening to us. He said, go now. I find you again another day. There's much more to be said. And then they go back to the party.
Yep.
And they say, I searched for Diego, but before I located him, someone brushed my elbow as they stepped up behind me. Evening, a deep voice murmured in my ear, and I didn't have to look up to know who it was. Orion moved past me, left her there. And then that's really the end of the chapter. And then, so we go into a Tory chapter.
Yep.
As the night wore on, I began to relax more and more. Sophia, she was looking at Sophia. She was looking up at him like he was the reason the sun appeared each morning, but his attention was wavering a little. He alternated between looking back at her and glancing around the room. I just hoped it was because he was nervous and not because he was losing interest. And then she is talking about how she didn't tell Tori about her and Caleb's thing. And then she was talking about how she could have just gone up to Justin and asked him for a dance because everybody else is coupled up. And she was kind of like regretting not saying yes to someone that had asked her. And then she reached the bar and ordered herself a drink. And he says, it's not too late.
Caleb, shows up.
Caleb shows up. Caleb's rough voice came from beside me, and I turned to find him leaning on the bar as if he'd been there all along. He uses vampire speed to shoot into the position, and I offered him a half smile as I eyed his pristine navy suit. Memories of his hands on my body, his mouth against mine, came pouring in, and a little flood of heat built in me. Not too late for what? To sneak out of here and have some real fun. You'll have to work harder than that if you want me. And he says, I promise you, I'll work really hard. She goes, tempting, but no.
And then Caleb goes, Caleb's lips pursed with disappointment, and he opened his mouth to say something else before Max and Darius appeared at her side. So he was going to say something.
And then she goes, off you run. I muttered, and Caleb hesitated a moment, seeming torn between going to his friends and staying with me. But we both knew what he'd do, and he smiled ruefully as he took a step away. He says, I'm not switching allegiances, Tori, he said in a low voice, sounding resigned. No matter how good you look in that dress, we still can't let you take our throne.
She's like, I don't want your damn throne.
Sad. Sad.
Yeah.
And then she runs into Geraldine. She goes, holy jammy Dodgers on a diamond encrusted plate. You're Matt. And she's like, stop. And then she says, I'm so glad you're all right. And she says, thank you. It took a while before I could get my magic to start replenishing itself again, but I'm finally feeling like my old self. A bunch of the ass members surrounded her. And then as I backed out of the crowd, I collided with a hard chest and turned to find Diego there with an amused smile on his face. Need a hand escaping the masses? I think I made it out alone, thanks. Have you seen Darcy anywhere? She was headed outside. Seth disappeared not long after. He's been hounding after her a lot recently. Do you think we should be worried? He says, don't worry, I'm sure she's fine. Ignoring the little warning trickle that ran down my spine, I'm just going to go and make sure. He says, I can come with you. She says, where's Sophia? And makes him stay. And so she goes outside, and Darius goes out for a walk, comes up behind her. There's nobody around.
Yep.
Did you want something? He says, last chance, Roxy. Take your sister and leave this academy. Go back to your little mortal lives and leave Solaria in the hands of people who are worthy of the throne. She said, I'm not going anywhere, so you need to get over it. He said, is that your final decision? And then he goes, then I guess I'm going to have to change your mind. And then he holds her. He goes, no. She says, let go of me. He says, no, I don't think I will. You're going to learn a little lesson about respect, and I won't have you turning your back on me again. And then he
uses coercion.
and don't fight me and don't scream. And then he like steals her.
Mm-hmm.
And then we move into Darcy's POV. While that was all happening.
Yep. She dances dances with Seth.
And then she slipped outside to get some air. She was hot all over and had a knot in her stomach that kept warning me against Seth. As it should. Good belly. Fucking douchebag.
Instincts.
She literally is thinking he'll cut your heart out and eat it raw. And then so she goes out there and Orion runs into her. And his hand fell to my waist for the briefest of moments and his fingers pinched the material of my dress. And it said we both knew he shouldn't have done it. And he keeps kind of looking around.
See if anybody's like around.
But he goes, why do you keep flirting with the devil? He asked. And for a second, I thought he meant himself. Seth Capella. You're my liaison, sir, not my life guru. If I want to date Seth, I will. He is kind of jealous. And you can like see. And he goes, or she says, keeping you, am I? Because he keeps looking around. And she essentially like comes to the realization that it's because he shouldn't be doing this. He should not be alone with her. So she kind of uses that against him a little bit. And she says, from the shifty way you're acting, why did you follow me out here anyway? You could have bitten me inside. He goes, why am I even tolerating this conversation? And then he says, oh, what does he say? Where is it? He literally says, I'm not supposed to be doing this. And then
yeah, because she's like, really, you're gonna bite me tonight of all nights. She starts laughing because she realizes why he's acting so oddly. She says, so this place does draw lines, and Orion was sliding a toe across one, which means I now have a weapon. So she goes, not strictly allowed to do this, is it, sir? And he goes, where did you get that idea? And she goes, from the shifty way you're acting. And then he goes, I shouldn't be here alone with you. It's not appropriate. And she goes, but we spend time alone in your office every Monday. And he goes, that's different. He growled, seeming agitated as he threw a look at the path again. What would happen if I told Principal Nova about this? And he goes, would you? And then she goes, try me. And so then
she said, I whispered, quietly knowing I wasn't much of a snitch. But he like leans in.
Almost like he's about to like kiss her flesh. Like super close and not like attacky, more like just like caressing almost.
And then someone cleared their throat and Seth was standing there. And he essentially was just waiting for Orion to bite her so that he could have him back. My thoughts now on this are he thought he was going to drain her of her power. But Orion says, stay away from him. Go inside.
He's trying to warn her.
He is trying to warn her. In a flash of movement, he was gone, and I was left reeling from the encounter. Seth jogged to her side, all good. He was like, what's wrong, babe? He said, liar, did he hurt you? She said, no. And then he said, if he bothers you, I can get my pack to make him back off. We don't normally take on professors, but you're worth it. He leaned in.
And she's like, oh, God, I shouldn't be out here alone with an heir, let alone thinking about kissing one.
Yep. Orion had told me to stay away from Seth and that had riled up something crazy, so she was defying him. That's all this was. And she goes, am I really going to... I think this was a little bit earlier. She goes, am I really going to date Seth just to...
Piss off Orion?
But his lips brushed hers. He ended up kissing her.
They're sitting on a bench, like making out.
She goes, dog boy. Was a ridiculously good kisser. Probably shouldn't be kissing his face off right now, though. And then his hand roamed up to my neck and something cold brushed my skin. I flinched and his free arm suddenly locked around me. Hard. Seth? I yelped, breaking our kiss as his hold became painful. He snatched hold of my bun, then the world stopped turning as he sliced something sharp through it. No, I gasped in absolute horror. He cut all of her fucking hair off.
And then, he takes it and he says,
told you I'd get your hair.
Well, right before that, he says something about, like, not...
No, that's the first time he talks.
Yeah, then right after that... Yeah, it's right after that. Giggles fill the air, and Kylie bursts from the bushes and says, I recorded the whole thing. And he goes, nothing personal, Vega. It's just the way of the Fae. If you don't want things getting even worse for you, then take your sister and get out of the academy. And then they go... They say, let's go to Lunar Leisure. I don't want to miss the fun. She starts having almost like a panic attack
Yeah.
as she like collapses to the ground. And she's like, get up, get back to Air Tower, but she couldn't make herself move. And panic's rising up in her, and she realizes that Kylie has recorded the whole thing. And then a hand pressed to her shoulder, and Orion is back.
She says, have I come to say I told you so? Have you come to say I told you so? And he like makes her stand up. She goes, why'd you come back? He says, my spidey senses were tingling. And she's like,
is that a joke?
And he says it was a pretty good one, I think. Now the blue is gone. How will I tell which twin is which?
He's trying to make a joke of it, make her feel.
He's trying to make her feel
better.
a little bit better. And then she hears a scream, and she takes off running
because she recognizes the scream as Tori.
And then the next chapter is Tori. Yeah, this is a rough chapter. It's the last one or second
when
to last
you see it from the boys' perspective, you're like, oh shit. It just puts a whole new perspective on it from the guys' chapter.
I don't give a we'll see how I feel at the end of the next book, but they almost.
Yeah, we'll get into it. Okay, so
she's like, where are you taking me? He said, we're going to see some friends, and he takes her into the pool in the Lunar Leisure.
And there's 3 diving boards. One that's like super, super, super high.
So we've learned already that she's extremely scared of deep water. It's 16 feet deep. And the diving board is 4 feet above the water. So
there's a crowd around the pool watching as this happens.
Max says, to rise to the top, we fight against our fears and come out triumphant. He says, thanks for sharing your fears with me. It made planning this so much easier.
And he goes, so shouldn't one of the girls who claim to be our queens have to prove that she can do the same?
Caleb caught my eye as I passed him, and he threw me a smile, which was as mocking as it was cruel. A sliver of ice stabbed straight through my chest at that smile. It wasn't like I thought we were embarking on some epic romance, but she does say I'd begun to think of him almost like a friend.
Yeah.
He says, Darius says, come on then, Roxy, up you go. She says, I can barely swim. I breathed, making sure he knew exactly what he was about to do to me.
So also,
I'll drown if I jump in there.
Also, right when she's talking about Caleb, just real quickly, he has like this coldness about his gaze, and then she says he may not have been an active participant, but with this latest torture, but he sure as shit wasn't going to stop it from happening.
And after she says, I'll drown if I jump in there, Darius says, are you ready to bow to us then and leave this school behind? I looked into his dark eyes, wondering if there was even a hint of humanity lurking in there. I didn't glare at him or scowl or throw my hatred into my gaze. I just looked and let him see the girl I was. Let him see who he was doing this to, while wondering if he was even capable of pity or remorse. I wasn't some long lost heir come to steal his throne. I was just a girl trying to reclaim something that had been stolen from me and figure out my place in this screwed up world. Darius's lips parted and something shifted in his eyes. For half a second, I actually thought he was going to back off, let me walk away with my tail between my legs and be satisfied by knowing he'd won without forcing me to go through with this. And then Max coerces her, start climbing all the way to the top. I fucking hate Max. I hate him.
Why?
What do you mean, why?
Why?
He's the one that made them tell him their fears. Made them. He used his power against them. Made them tell him their fears. Then Darius was about to back out.
And he's the one that orders her.
And he coerced her to go up the fucking thing. I fucking hate him.
I can't wait to talk about the boys' perspective.
I hate Max.
I can't wait.
I don't give a shit.
I can't wait.
Fucking hate him.
I can't wait. Because nothing. We'll talk about our ranking of the boys later. Which ones we like the most.
So she goes up and everybody's like, jump, 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 jump. And then Seth walks in. He says, I was worried I was going to miss the show. I've just finished destroying the other one.
And a stone drops in her stomach at hearing
She's
those
like,
words.
oh, fuck, like my sister. And then Max calls, are you ready, little Vega?
And then Darius and Max start making the pool into like almost this vortex of water.
Yeah. Max coerces her and says jump, but she's able to fight that off. And then she feels the wind. Seth raised his arms, grinning up at him as he called on his power. He was going to make her fall in. So she ran and jumped. She managed to swim up to the top, got some air in, took her dress off because it was just holding her down. And then Darius made a large column of water and dropped it on her head, and she got pushed all the way back down. And then she tried to come back up, and she hit the light finally and realized that there was a sheet of ice
over the top.
Her fire, it allowed her to make a hole in it once. She got a breath of air, and then they reinforced it and got her pushed back down. And her so magic flared again.
With her with a bunch of water. She can't get to the surface.
My magic flared again, and this time a spiderweb of cracks shot out over the ice, but it didn't break. My limbs were trembling from the cold and the panic, and I could feel the urge to take a breath swelling up inside of me. My heartbeat whooshed in my ears. My lungs were burning, and I fought as hard as I could against the inevitable, but I'd already lost that fight. Darkness prickled on the edges of my vision, and I took a breath. She filled her lungs with water. We moved to a Darcy chapter. Orion
takes off. Darcy takes off running.
And he jumps in and saves Tori. He pulls Tori out and starts healing her. And then he yells. He says, if a single person in this room moves another inch, because everybody was trying to get the fuck out, you will be facing immediate expulsion. The heirs stopped walking, falling silent. Darius scraped a hand down the back of his neck, looking riled for the first time ever. Seth was rubbing against all of them as if trying to soothe them, and the sight of my hair poking out of his pocket made me want to scream. Orion said, face the fucking wall. And then he went over and kind of tried to... interrogate them. He said, no one's leaving this room until I hear what happened. He grabbed Seth's head. This one makes me giggle. Orion prowled toward the heirs, grasped Seth's hair in his fist, and slammed his head against the wall with a loud crack. Do you have anything to say about what happened to the Vega twins tonight? No, sir, Seth said. Orion stepped toward Max. How about you? He said, no, sir. Orion moved to Caleb, leaning in to speak in his ear. Have you been fucking with your source, Caleb? You know that goes against the vampire code, and I might just be in the mood to get your fangs ripped out for it. Caleb's broad shoulders tensed in anger. I'm aware of the code, sir. I didn't do anything to her. He didn't.
He just stood by and watched it happen, which is also kind of fucked up because they're supposed to protect their sources. It's like in the vampire code, when you claim a source, you're supposed to protect them not only from other vampires, but from other
If she died, he would have lost his source.
Yeah. It's like, it's the vampire code. You're supposed to protect them.
Bullshit, Orion snapped. Orion moved to Darius, resting a hand on his shoulder, which, like I said, that comes up. And he says, are you going to lie to my face too, Darius? Darius shook free of him. Can't lie to your face when I'm facing a wall, can I? He spun him around. One last chance, Orion said. Explain. We want them out. We're just trying to get them out. You know the pressure we're under. Max found out their fears, and, well, we brought them to life. And Darcy's thinking, could they be any more cruel? We didn't even want their throne, and they were still willing to break us, so we'd leave. Orion shook his head, his face painted with disappointment. I thought you, of all the heirs, were better than your parents. My mouth fucking dropped here, because that's like the biggest insult for Darius. Because
you know how close Darius and Orion are, the things that they went through with Clara and all of that, and how Darius hates his father, and Orion has always been there for him. They've been in it together. And then Darius does something so unimaginable that Orion is like, I thought you were better than him.
So this is the part where you know that they weren't out to kill the girls.
They were just there to...
This part solidified it in me that it was not them that they were going after, because Orion saved her.
Yeah.
One. And he was fucking furious.
Pissed.
The amount of anger he has towards Darius here.
That they were going to do that. He had an inkling that they were up to something, but he didn't know like to what extent. And the fact that they almost killed...
The amount of disappointment and anger he has toward Darius here, I was like, they're not trying. They're not. Nope, it's not the girls they're after. And then he sentenced everybody to detention for a week, and the heirs had to go for 2 weeks. And the girls were like, that's it?
Yeah. Right after that, Orion turns his back on Darius. And Darcy's like, oh, shit. He's like super pissed because that's like one of the biggest insults. Then
the girls were still picking on Darcy because of her hair. And then he healed Tori some more. She said, I just want to go. And then we moved to a Tori chapter. he says, draw on your fire magic. It'll help warm you up. He said, I'm just making sure all the water's out of your lungs, trying to make sure that she's not going to die. And then
Tori asks what happened to Darcy.
Their faces, and they look back to the heirs. Seth, Caleb, and Max were still standing against the wall, though they'd turned to look at us. Their faces were written with displeasure at the turn of events. The only one looking back at me was Caleb. His jaw was tight and his eyes full of secrets that I couldn't begin to fathom. And then her heart leapt with another jolt of fear. She was trying to cover herself because she was naked she was in her undergarments because she had taken her dress off. And then Orion had told Caleb, take your shirt off and give it to Miss Vega. Because Caleb, she's his source.
And
like,
she goes,
he's
I don't
supposed
want
to take care of her.
him.
Which is huge. Like, I feel like that's a turning point for their relationship right there because they were starting to get close. Orion chugged his own jacket off and gave it to her. And
Which
she
is
says,
also not like another insult. When another vampire starts taking care of your source because you can't do it, like,
she won't let him.
Yeah.
He ruined that relationship. And then she says they'd wanted to break me, and maybe they had. And then Orion looked at Darcy and said, I'll walk you back. A high-pitched scream. Orion says, what now? And then they go out, and they see, like, a bunch of fire. Students are surrounding everywhere. Somebody's, I think Diego. Yes. So
a sickly smell that caught in the back of their throat. Everybody's surrounded by a huge fire that's blazing.
He said, I've only ever seen dragon fire burn like that. Which I think
Darius had left the other heirs. He had stormed out.
Yeah. Which I think at this point, this is Diego trying to set it up. Little bitch ass. Trying to make it seem like it's dragon fire, and it's fucking not. Anyway.
You'll see.
The girls... So it was all Orion watered the fire down, got it out, and they saw a charred body in a fetal position in the middle. And then Darcy says we should get out of here. Tori says wait. The ground ringing the body was blackened with soot and water. My bare foot pressed down in the muck, and I shuddered. I could feel a strange kind of tug on my magic right in the center of my chest, and as I focused on it, a faint tingling came to my fingertips. She said, do you feel that? Darcy nodded warily, and that was all the confirmation I needed. I gave in to the pull of my magic and let it slip into my fingers as I let it loose. The corpse behind us twitched, its arms shifting as its charred fingers fell open. I almost screamed, staggering back and bumping into Darcy as horror gripped me. But before the sound could make it from my lips, something flew from the corpse's fist and shot straight towards us. The dark card slipped against my chest, and I gripped it, automatically glancing down in surprise. It was smooth and firm in my grip, miraculously undamaged by the flames, which had destroyed its owner's body. Orion made everybody leave, and then they followed the dispersing crowd, blah, blah, blah. Darcy reached out to take it, and her fingers... Oh, shit. Darcy gasped as her eyes fell on the picture of a cloaked skeleton riding a horse. Its empty eyes were staring up at us in warning. At the bottom of the card was a single word.
Death.
Darcy reached out to take it. As her fingers brushed the card, the warmth emanating from it flared to a burn. I almost dropped it in surprise, but a set of pale eyes seemed to blink at me on the edges of my consciousness, and for a second, it was as though Professor Astrom was standing before us. The image was gone as soon as it has come, and I frowned at Darcy in confusion as I flipped the card over. On the back of it were words written in a swirling silver script, and as I read them, my heart plummeted into the pit of my stomach. I made a mistake, and now my time is up. The shadow has discovered me, and there is no hope for me to escape their wrath. The answers you seek are hidden between Leo and Libra. Don't trust the flames. Claim your throne. Falling star. So that charred body, Professor Astrom.
And then at the very end of it, she says, we were alone against the heirs, and I was beginning to think that we were destined to fall at their mercy. That's how the first book ends.
End of book freaking one. I fucking hate him. Like, Caleb is the only one that I'm like, that I don't super hate. Max, he's at the bottom.
Okay, so can I say that when both me and Samantha read this book, we were on the exact same page. We were like, I fucking hate all of them. Seth is the fucking worst. Max is the fucking worst.
Max is on the
Darius
bottom for me.
Not standing
I'm
up
giving
for
my
them.
list right now because I need to get this fucking shit out. Max is on the bottom.
Okay.
Seth is right next to him.
Mm-hmm.
Then Darius.
Yeah.
And then Caleb.
Because at least he has an asshole father that he is like pushing.
I don't give a fuck.
And he's trying to
You're
protect.
your own goddamn person.
He's trying to protect his brother. So like, I get it. I get it.
I don't. Caleb is at the top of the boys, and then Orion. He's got a heart right now.
Little heart for saving them. Okay, so also wrap up. You think Diego's sketchy?
He's not just sketchy. I'm putting that out there. Okay. I don't just think I know that there's something going on with him, and I think that he's the one controlling something. I just don't know how involved in it he is. But he is bad, for sure.
Okay. And then...
Enemy numero uno.
It's Diego.
Yep.
I just like all the predictions. So you don't like the boys. Diego's bad. Geraldine, love her. And then Professor Astrom, we found out was...
Falling Star. I want to know how he's connected to
Gabriel.
Gabe.
So Gabriel comes in book 3 because they need a replacement for tarot class. And if you've read Ruthless Boys, you know that Gabriel is all involved in like visions and tarot.
And he's offered a job in the end of
Ruthless Boys to come work with Orion.
Yeah.
So how do you think Professor Astrom was involved with?
I think it has to do with the cards. I think their mom imbued what happened to them into the cards, and he was trying to figure them out. And I actually think Gabriel's going to be the one to figure it out.
For them?
Yeah. He's already got an inkling. He knows about the twins.
Because he's had visions.
He's had multiple visions of them.
A war coming for the throne.
Yeah. I hate the boys right now. I understand that As Told by the Boys is supposed to make me like them, and we'll talk about it at the end.
So I will say that it did. It made me understand their perspective.
We'll see. We'll see how
I don't want to ruin it, but we'll see after you read it.
Like some other predictions. Who's controlling the nymphs? Right? There's no way that they're doing it all on their own. They have to have a controller. I'm assuming it has something to do with the reason why Lionel wanted to get into the Shadow Realm.
Okay.
He wants to figure out how they're being controlled. I don't think that he's the one controlling them necessarily, but I think he has a hand in it.
Okay.
Of what's going on. He is enabling it. Yes. That's the biggest things that are going on right now is the attacks. Diego's fucking bad. Oh, Dragonfire.
I can't wait for you to read.
He was in the library. I guarantee you that's who was in there.
Was listening to them?
Yep. It's why he magically made himself close to the girls in the beginning of the book.
Just
weird.
Do you have any inkling on what the twins can be? Order-wise?
No, but they're both
replenishing their magic
with fire.
Have we gone over how their mortal parents died?
In a fire, and they didn't. Yeah, they weren't affected by the flames at all.
Yeah, flames did not affect them. Which is also why Tori is like, I don't think my flames would hurt me, and she wants to not wear that uniform.
Yeah, I don't know too much about all of the different orders, so we'll find out. Are they both Hydras?
No. Okay. They're not like their dad.
Are they the same? Okay.
Me and Samantha at this point had a guess of what they were. So I'm just interested to see when you're going to be like, are they?
Anyway, so yeah.
You can just edit all of that out.
We're going to find out what the girls orders are soon, I'm sure.
I think it's next couple books.
Are you fucking kidding me right now?
I don't want to give you this specific book.
Why?
When it shows up.
Why?
Because.
Fucking A, man. They're just going to get bullied the whole time before the orders come out?
They get bullied for like a good 4 books. Because they can't harness their power. They're still getting bullied.
Disgusting. Anyway. So
they retaliate. They get their vengeance.
Welcome to episode 3, or I guess farewell from episode 3. That was all of book 1. The next episode will be a third of As Told by the Boys. The first section is we're going to read all the way through to chapter 8.
stop on an Orion chapter?
It is an Orion chapter. So these next ones should be fairly quickly because it's just a retelling of book 1. But
you think that, but there's so many just pieces.
Anyway.
This book.
There we are. We will see you guys next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe. If you would like us to change anything or you think anything would be helpful here, let us know in the comments. And we'll see what we can do.
If you have any theories.
Yeah, let us know how you feel about this. If you're reading along with us, thank you. That's really cool. Tell us how you feel about it. Talk to us. But yeah, we will see you guys next time with As Told by the Boys. So, bye guys. Thanks.
When you look my way, it gave me shivers.